Kristen Atchison here, and we are finishing up our chapter on moral development. This is the second video lecture on influences and the prosocial behavior. So there are different things that influence moral development that we know that are effective outside of kind of the development of it that we talked about previously in theories. There are psychological factors that really affect moral development. So we know that fearfulness is one of those things. So children that are more prone to fearfulness, they're going to internalize those parental rules differently, and so they're more susceptible to those things. They're going to adhere to those rules sooner and more often because of this fearfulness. Schooling, we really see that this is really predictive of reaching Kohlberg stage 4 or higher, and so what we're seeing here is again that this Kohlberg can't be a universal of moral development if there's environmental factors that play in, and schooling is one of those. We also see that social issues that really extend beyond personal relationships. So you get access to different kinds of social issues in a schooling environment that you don't necessarily get outside of formal education. And so again, this provides an opportunity to really learn from either true experiences or perceived experiences of others. We know that culture plays a big role. We already talked about how Kohlberg's theory wasn't culturally universal. And we see that the industrialized nations tend to move through Kohlberg stages quicker. And again, this is really going to be kind of indicative of some of that education and of some of those things. So Kohlberg's theory might be really good for Western industrialized cultures, but that really these highest levels of moral development really are a culturally specific way of thinking about morality, which really makes sense when you think that our culture really dictates what behaviors are morally appropriate and which behaviors aren't. And so that really lines up with that we don't see necessarily that there are universal moral rules in a lot of respects. I mean, there are cultures where it's okay, to kill your child if they, have committed some moral grievance. Where there's other cultures where that is just, for my culture, I can't even fathom that. And so we see these differences in cultural ideas, and so we see differences in the ways we think about morality in different cultures. One of the things that Piaget and Kohlberg both really thought influenced moral development was peer interaction. And they're correct. We know that peer interaction, especially with peers of different viewpoints, plays a big role in moral development. So when we talk about, not just hanging out with people that are like you and think like you, that's a good thing. And schooling really provides the opportunity for that. As we grow older, sometimes we tend to hang out with only those people that think like us. But as we're younger, we don't necessarily have those opportunities. You hang out with the people that are fun to play with. You hang out with the people who you trust. And so that gives you an opportunity to have peers with different viewpoints. These positive relationships between peer interactions really affect the level of morality. So these good relationships can be important. We really see that there are issues of morality embedded in peer interaction. So, this respect for others, this moral rules about stealing and hurting and those sorts of things. You can't have a good, solid relationship built on trust if you've been breaking these moral boundaries. So again, you see that these things go back and forth. We see that a social life that's based on cooperation between equals rather than authority relations really is beneficial for this as well. So when you create opportunities for children to really cooperate equally instead of having an authority figure just tell them what to do to solve the problem. That we see these kinds of gains in moral development. And the peer discussions and role-playing for interventions really can help moral development as well. So actively teaching these things as well. One of the things that Piaget didn't do a good job was factoring in parental influence. We know that parents actually play a much bigger role in moral development than Piaget originally thought. Children really accomplish a lot of their self-regulation by internalizing the rules and the the rules and when they do the rules right and when they don't do the rules right from the parents. And we see that different kinds of parenting style that we'll talk about more in our parenting and family chapter really affect this dramatically. So how the parents assert their power will affect moral development. How they treat love and how they treat affection. Well, one of those things, when withdrawal of affection is a punishment style, that's problematic for moral development. And so we'll see these kinds of things will really play a role in how a child develops their morality. Parents who really practice induction really have the children with the most advanced moral reasoning. So this is working through those hypotheticals, and you can see how working through those hypotheticals and talking about, well, if you were in this situation, what would you do, is really going to result in children performing better on these stage theories and have higher moral reasoning because they've had the opportunity to kind of know the test as one, but they also have the opportunity to kind of think through these things in safe ways where they're not high risk. And so we see both of these things are really good for developing moral reasoning. Child rearing practices, as you would guess with the addition of power assertion style and low withdrawal, we'll see that the child rearing practices that, again, we'll talk about more, authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and dismissive, are all effective of this. Because those are kind of on this spectrum of warmth, we see that warmth really is important, that this respect for the child, for appropriate demands for maturity, and these moral discussions really create opportunities where children can benefit and learn moral development from their parents. We see that religion can play a role in it too, although we do see formal religious involvement tends to decline in adolescence. So from 13 to 15, this is an old statistic, but about 55% of children were involved in formal religious activities. By 17 to 18, that was down to 40%. And when you get into the 20s and early adulthood, it's very, very low. Again, these are a little bit old data, so it's probably even lower than this now. Religious involvement, however, is really advantageous for moral development and behavior. We see this not necessarily because of the religion. It's not religion specific. It's because of the things that religions in general promote. Religions typically have a high call for community service, and so we see more opportunities for children to engage in community service, and we see benefits from that. You have discussions about, social behavior and societal behavior and these sorts of things. And so we see increases in academic and social behavior in these children. Because of these kind of, this active teaching of morality in a religious setting, we tend to see lower drug and alcohol use. We seem to see a delay of premarital sex or sex in general. We seem to see less delinquency in these individuals. Again, it's not religion specific. It's the environment that the religion provides to actively teach these things. And just like we saw on the parental slide, that's important. This actively teaching of this is really important. And so we'll see these decreases in religious, in these antisocial behaviors in correlation with this religious involvement. So let's move on to kind of other things that come out of this moral development. And one of those is prosocial behavior. So there's two different kinds of prosocial behavior that we're kind of going to talk a little bit about. And prosocial behavior is what it sounds like. It's something that's pro-social involvement, right? So it's something that's good for other people. It's not just good for yourself. That includes things like helping and sharing and conflict resolution. And you can tell that we try and teach children this really, really early, right? Helping and sharing behavior, you have to share with your friends. That's something that every parent has always said. And so these things, again, are taught. We also have empathy, which is to experience another's emotional state. And now this is different than sympathy, which is concern for another's emotional state or situation. Empathy is when that individual is feeling it the same way. So they're not only, are they sad that person's hurting, they're starting to hurt too. So empathy is this feeling with or responding in an emotionally similar way. So this is a picture of my daughter and one of her cousins when they were very, very young, and they were posing for pictures, and I think his tooth got knocked, and her immediate response was to hug him and to try and make him feel better. This is really demonstrating sympathy. She had this feeling of concern or sorrow for her cousin's plight. Now, if she had started crying and said she was hurt in response to that, that would have been empathetic feeling. Now, granted, she's really young in this picture. I mean, she still has the baby pigtails. So that would have been really, really hard to do. I think she's about 18 months in this picture. But again, you see this sympathy can starting very early. And again, this is something that children are picking up on as modeled behavior. When she hurt herself, we would grab her and hug her to comfort her and make her feel better. And so she learned that that's an appropriate response when someone is hurting. And so this sympathy and these prosocial behaviors are things that children learn through observational learning. Prosocial and altruistic behavior are actions that benefit another without expected reward for self. So she's hugging Landry not because she gets anything out of it, but because it hopefully will make him feel better. Now, that's obviously a very minor example of it, but again, toddlers exhibit this. By preschool, children use words to communicate this. So not only are they exhibiting this behavior, but they can verbally respond to why they're doing this and why they're trying to engage in these behaviors, these prosocial behaviors. Again, these things are experience-based. So again, when she got hurt, we would pick her up and comfort her. And so that's what happened when her cousin got hurt. She tried to kind of not really pick him up, but hug him and comfort him. We also see that empathy and prosocial behavior can be actively taught. And it can be actively taught in a couple of different ways. It can be an intervention kind of situation where you intervene when there's an inappropriate display of emotion or an inappropriate display of response. So if Landry had gotten hurt here and Bryn had started laughing at him, that would have been an inappropriate response. He's clearly in pain. And so that would have been an inappropriate response, and we would have intervened. But you can actually actively teach empathy and prosocial behaviors in other ways too. Our different schools have started to try and do this as well. My daughter's school does this mindsets, the 7 mindsets, and one of them is live to give. And so this month they're collecting materials for a shelter for this idea of this live to give, that we need to have this spirit of generosity. We have to kind of do these things. You can actively teach these things in other ways. And again, and it can go both ways. So my daughter, when we moved here, she was 3 years old. It was right after Christmas. After Christmas, we moved. We packed up all her toys. We lived in transitional housing for a while. We got into the house. We unpacked all her toys, and it was about her birthday. So she basically hadn't even done anything with any of her Christmas presents. And so we were like, no, this child does not need any more birthday presents. So for her friend birthday party, what we're going to do is we're going to ask for donations to, whatever religion, whichever organization that they want to give to in lieu of that. And it's kind of snowballed from there. And she every year now picks an organization that she wants her friends to donate to. And so she's done animal shelters, she's done transitional housing programs, she's done other countries, she's sent hygiene kits and materials to Haiti. So she's done different things, and we have actively taught her to do that. There's a lot of, work on my part in finding organizations that accept physical donations and these sorts of things. So we're actively teaching her this. However, by her engaging in that, and she wants to do it now every year, she picks the organization. She's excited. She already starts thinking about the next year as soon as the first year's done. But her friends have started modeling this behavior, and we've started to go to more of these kind of donation parties. And we're not actively teaching them. She's not telling her friends, hey, you need to do this behavior. This is what you should do. But this modeling behavior You see that coming up. So both actively teaching and modeling are really, really important. We also see that this can be negatively impacted too. So for children who are abused, they rarely show empathy, but typically act like their abuser would. So again, this modeling goes both ways. You can model good, prosocial, empathetic, sympathetic behavior, or individuals can model antisocial behavior. They can model inappropriate emotional responses. They can model all of these other things. So children are really learning these prosocial behaviors and these kind of moral behaviors through experience. And so, like we've said, kind of all throughout the semester, the better the input, the better the output. When children are exposed to prosocial, empathetic, sympathetic behavior, they're more likely to engage in that. This ends our conversation on moral development. Thanks.